if this podcast had one single message or legacy for all of those listeners or people listening to this in the future, what would you want it to be?
Oh my goodness, diversify. I want to leave you with that, like diversify your portfolio and look beyond stocks and bonds. There's so much more out there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, welcome to the kind of the last hiatus episode of the Land and Everything Else podcast. I'm Dr. Craig Lemoine, and I'm really excited. Thank you for coming on this awesome adventure with me. We've had 60-something guests who are incredible people. I've really enjoyed talking to each of you, and we're recording this today at the University of Illinois, and I'm here with two people that have given of themselves to make this happen. We've got Presley Fee, who's been our fearless producer the last 3 years. Presley, say hi.
Hello.
And
hi,
we've
everyone.
got my buddy Jim, who's off camera, and Jim has been helping me for the last decade at Illinois with all things audio, video, scale, and production. So Jim, heartfelt thank you for your work on this. So we wanted to have a kind of a wrap it up episode. Land and Everything Else has been a great 3-year run. We've talked a lot about alternative investments. We've made some incredible friends. And I want to kind of start our episode today with a few thank yous. So I don't forget, a big thank you to the College of Aces for their support in getting this started and this endeavor moving forward, to People's Company for their annual support over the last 3 years. We really couldn't have kept it going a third season without them. So thank you to both. In the Department of ACE has also been very supportive in this endeavor. And so those three entities, I really thank. We couldn't have done this without you. So with that, I'm going to kick it over to Presley. We're gonna do a bit of a reverse Uno card here. Presley's going to interview me for this last episode, and I'm really excited to see where it goes. So I'll shut my pie hole now.
This is my first time on this side of the camera, which is a little intimidating. I'm impressed that you've done this for 3 years with 60 plus guests. And so on that note, I'd like to take it back to when we started 3 years ago.
3 years ago. 3 years ago.
And when you think back to those first few episodes, the first few times that we were recording these episodes, what really stands out to you about that time?
I mean, I think the overall pivot of the show changed, right? Because these episodes were part of a larger grant to build out a number of public-facing courses. And so when we were first shooting the first season and probably half of the second season, I had learning objectives that I wanted from every episode built out, right? So I wasn't trying to sell a product or a service or a company, and I think we've held to that the whole time. We haven't tried to sell anything. But I do think it's been important to say, those first probably 30 episodes, every guest, I had some learning objectives I wanted to cover. So you might have heard on those first podcasts, we would let it drift a little, but I'd pull it back with specific questions. And the reason for that was we took 3 to 5 minute segments out of all those first 30 or so podcasts, and we wound up weaving them into a series of courses on alternative investments, 6 total public-facing courses. And so that was like the first half of it. So when you go back to those first episodes, I remember I was just as nervous to get those learning objectives answered as I was setting it up. Never had trouble talking to people. That's not the issue. But it was kind of fun to kind of like, all right, these are the things we're going to get into. And so those were kind of those first episodes. And we did a lot more. I think I didn't realize the time commitment. And so we kind of do one-offs or two-offs, right? And we'd be like, all right, we're going to come to you and spend a whole day and do one episode, right? And it's kind of, you realize pretty quick on, you're like, well, that's not going to work, right? Like, it's too busy. So, we did one off and then a 2 off, and then we were like, we're just going to do 8. I think that's the way to do this. So, and then 8 was too many. So we pulled back to like 4.
Yeah, I was going to say that definitely there were challenges with either way. And I think the 8 per day was definitely ambitious.
That was a rough day.
So since that beginning process where we were figuring out the best setup and all of that, how has your perspective on the podcast and its purpose really changed over the last 3 years?
Yeah, I mean, I think its purpose shifted to one where we could talk a little more in the ag space.
Mm-hmm.
I think I tried to start with a little more alts. You can look back at some of the episodes, had a lot on private equity, private credit, collectibles. And I think we've landed a little more around the thesis, which was land and everything else. And so I think in the last season, you've seen almost all ag conversations. And so that shift is somewhat reflected by the pool of guests that we've worked with and talked to, and some great people, but all with one foot in ag. And I think that's a pretty good way for that third season to go. Certainly a little less in the real estate space, but quite a bit more in the ag sector.
Yeah, we've had a lot of really interesting and fun guests.
We really have.
Join us.
Really smart people too, much smarter than I am, which I enjoy wholeheartedly. Talk to people smarter than you are. There's some advice.
There's a lot of very interesting conversations. But was there ever a moment where you felt like this is exactly why I wanted to start this podcast?
There was, but it didn't have anything to do with the podcast. There's a moment where we had finished our first set of Coursera classes, right? Mm-hmm. And so they were kind of done, and they're out there and this public-facing classes. And then all of a sudden I got asked, well, that really went well. It was fun to work together. You had these incredible content. We'd like to do something in the AI wealth financial planning space, and we'd run a class in that as a one-off elective. So we already had some content. Mm-hmm. And that's the moment where I was like, well, this is working out pretty well. Like all of a sudden we've kind of done this thing, and then we're getting tapped to build more, and we're getting tapped to build more with a bit of a budget because in part of the success of the podcast. And so that was a moment that really stuck with me, is like, oh, now you want me to do some more of these. And, that kind of worked well, and then paid for the next thing, so forth and so on. But that was really this moment of going, all right, there's some global reach here. Mm-hmm. And I think that's pretty fun.
Yeah. Well, with that global reach, I think we've had a pretty steady crew of listeners since the beginning. So have you ever heard from a listener? Yeah,
I think it's kind of fun. Last fall of 25, I had a sudden flurry of public speaking, and I don't really know where it came from. I wasn't even really planning on it. But there were a few opportunities where I got asked, hey, you want to come out? And I got to go to FPA, and I got to go to NAPFA, and I got to go to Land Expo, and I got to go to regional FPA. And at every event I was at, people would come up and say, hey, I really like Land and Everything Else. It's kind of a unique in the space. And they would share maybe a little bit about their favorite episode. And one guy came up to me, started talking opportunity zones. Another guy came up to me, started talking baseball cards. And it was kind of fun to have those conversations. And I think this podcast has been a medium to those convos. And it's been kind of neat. And those three kind of national stage presence every time someone would come up after I was done speaking and talk about the podcast. And so that was a neat way to connect with people above and beyond sort of a normal, hey, I really liked your stick on reverse mortgages. This is a better, kind of a more genuine, or, land or opportunity zones, mm-hmm. whatever it was I was talking about. To have those like kind of meaningful insights were kind of fun. I like that. Yeah. We've had quite a few students listen also, which is exciting. It is exciting. I don't make them. Just to be clear, like no one's making you listen to the podcast. Like I'm not that egotistical or self-grandizing. So no, but they do listen, and then they'll talk about it. Yeah. And when they get excited about the topics that are, not always things that we get to spend a lot of time on in class. Right. It's pretty cool to see them get excited about fun things like opportunity zones and talking about baseball cards and all that fun stuff. And, land, real estate, all that jazz. Yeah. If this podcast had one single message or legacy for all of those listeners or people listening to this in the future, what would you want it to be? Oh my goodness, diversify, right? Like in a word. Like I would hope that anyone that's listened to Land and Everything Else over the last few years, or even just picked up this one episode today, diversification, right? The entire thesis statement of the podcast is that in the wealth management space, we often overlook land and ag completely in a portfolio. And we can show with modeling, we can show with access points and entry points that land and different types of agricultural crops, farmland, permanent crops, any kind of row crops, and even for that matter, sort of more developed land, inevitably has this incredible place with stocks and bonds and a portfolio. And I think, the conversation generally we'll stop at real estate and specifically real estate investment trusts, and we check that box and we think we're done. And I would really hope that the thesis of this entire podcast is that you're not done enough for that, and there's more to go. And when you build sophisticated portfolios for clients, especially in an institutional high net worth or family office space, you absolutely need to be looking at ag and land as a piece of that portfolio.
Which I think is overlooked frequently.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And that was kind of the whole driving mechanism of this podcast early on. And it was kind of fun. We got to talk about commercial real estate. We did some private debt. We did private equity. You know, we've covered some other types of alts. But at its core, you know, we named it land and everything else. And then we've definitely just made the point to say diversify. And I think that's my one, I want to leave you with that, like diversify your portfolio and look beyond stocks and bonds. There's so much more out there.
Well, shifting gears a little bit.
Let's shift.
How has hosting this podcast changed you personally, your personal life, your personal outlook on these things?
So I'm going to answer that in two parts. I'll answer the technical and scientific, from a PhD standpoint, scientific standpoint. You know, I think it's increased my belief that, you know, in viable large-scale asset classes that are underutilized, and again, ag being one of them, I think commercial real estate to some extent, it's really opened my understanding of private markets, of non-publicly traded securities. I have a rich depth. Heck, we made a whole class in the privately traded space and the non-regulated securities, right? We talked about regulatory policy around that. We have a whole depth of knowledge. It's increased my tax understanding from a technical standpoint. This has been a masterclass in alts. And I think I've been the benefactor of that masterclass. I've talked with 60-something professionals that do this for a living in different ways. And every single time I learn something and I'm better at it. And so from a technical standpoint, I would say I've absolutely hit my A game in the world of alternative investments. And I would say that has increased my working and wealth management knowledge dramatically, right? That's like the technical answer. And it's very true. I'm much sharper than I was 3 years ago. Absolutely on that end. On the personal level, you know, it's a lot of time to do a good podcast, and you need a good team to do a good podcast. And teams, you know, Pod Pony has been a great partner as we've gone through this journey. You and Jim have been great partners as we've gone through this journey. And it's really kind of made me understand and have more respect for persistency. It's easy to do a podcast for 3 months. And I'm not trying to throw shade on anybody. It's hard to do a podcast for 3 years. And I think that kind of tenacity has often required me to dig deep in myself, put on a smiley face as best I can. And we all know I don't do it that well. And then gotten out of bed at the crack of dawn to do this and do it over and over and over again. So, you know, that's I think the tenacity side of it is that I have a lot of respect for people that regularly put podcasts on and don't miss days and have a good schedule. Again, 3 months is real easy, but 3 years is hard. And for people that have done it for 10 years, my hat is really off to them.
I feel like that speaks to the good team. I mean, I remember when we were talking about starting this and we were like, oh, we'll just learn the correct equipment and how to do the setup and how to edit it and post it and all of that.
No.
The jingle. The whole 9 yards. And that was, we very quickly realized this
needs professionals.
Yeah. And Pod Pony's been
a great team.
Amazing, especially with those shoots of 8 a day.
That was rough. Maybe in hindsight, that was too many, but that's okay.
It was fun. We talked to some fun people.
It was fun.
Yeah.
It was fun. It's been neat. It's hard to say like one favorite guest because there are a lot of people I've really enjoyed talking to. But it really has been quite a journey of persistence, that I will say.
Yeah. So what comes next for you?
What comes next? Well, you know, I answer this with the team in the room because what comes next for me is to some extent incumbent on what comes next for them agreeing. I think that I haven't shared this with you at all.
Oh, yay.
So watching your face right now is going to be great. I think I have explored alternative investments to the extent that my professional career is going to explore them, right? And it doesn't necessarily mean there's not more to explore, nor does it mean that I know everything. But what I'm really good at is growing things. And what I'm really good at, to some extent, is scaling up. And I think that the next kind of public YouTube podcast space is going to be a lot about scaling, a lot about growing in higher ed, and also in wealth management and financial planning. So I don't quite have it all sketched out yet, but it's coming. And the people in this room are certainly going to be part of that journey. But we're going to have some fun with scaling up. We're going to have some fun with growing. I think that there's a lot to be said in that kind of scaling growth space. So be ready, because we have something coming soon.
That's exciting to me.
Is it exciting to you? It doesn't make you...
I'm not sure about Jim.
Jim, is it exciting to you? It's exciting to Jim. So I think that's going to be next, because I think that's more in line with the last probably 7 years of my career, 5 or 6, 7 years, has really been one of... Yes, I still teach, but I do a lot of growth and strategy and planning. And so I think that's going to be a little more what we talk about next.
Awesome. It's exciting.
It is exciting.
Maybe we'll be back on the podcast to talk about it.
Well, we'll be back on a podcast, that's for sure. But yeah, so just kind of in closing, it's been an awful lot of fun. And I just really wanted to thank everybody who's helped us get here. I hope you've enjoyed Land and everything else. I know it's been a labor of love for me. And, this has been a ton of fun. So I just kind of want to end on that. So thank you all for your help. Thank you, Pod Pony. Thank you, Presley. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, People's Company, Aces. And thank you, everybody that's listened. I hope you've enjoyed it.
And thank you, Craig.
Oh, thank you.